Good afternoon. Oh, still got my name on there, which is kind of crazy. I'm not 5 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, but my name's Carl. My name's Carl, and I am the founder of Meet Magic. I should have changed that before, but I actually didn't. That's a bit of a faux pas. But what I am is very, very excited about what you are about to learn, because this is all brought to you by Meet Magic, and I want to say a huge thank you to the community of 2,000 plus members and executives who are in 5 countries now, who have allowed me to get this little experiment to where it is today. So a big thank you to our team and everybody who's been supportive along the way. As you know, our aim with Meet Magic was to create a sustainable fundraising model for charities. What we've actually created is a digital platform that is changing the way sales interactions between B2B suppliers and buyers are occurring. Now, these digital channels, not just according to me, according to Gartner, are the future. And more importantly, we are reframing the way meetings are happening. It's a brand new, hassle-free way for tech leaders and executives to give back. Now, our team have validated this idea over the past 3 years by helping vendors complete over 3,000 meetings in 5 countries. And that's allowed Meet Magic to donate over $1.5 million to various charities, including $1 million directly to the Starlight Children's Foundation. So that's helped over 40,000 sick kids. It's quite incredible. So this is how we reframe what a meeting is. And you'll hear more about that, I think, when Rory talks in a little while. And a little bit of background on how Rory and I connected, because he is the #1 ad man on the planet, regardless. It's incredible. But this story is all about me lying in bed one night, doom scrolling on TikTok. And I saw this video, and you can go and find it now on YouTube. It's a 1-minute clip where he did a podcast with the Diary of a CEO. And he was talking about the trains, and he was talking about the Uber, the psychological moonshot. And I thought, this guy is a complete genius. So I tweeted him. I didn't expect him to reply, but I woke up the next morning and got a reply. I jumped out of bed and I was completely excited. And I started talking to him about Meet Magic. And he said, this is a genius idea. And so I was planning a trip to London, and I said, let's catch up. And we agreed to catch up. We agreed to go and have lunch at one of his favorite places. And thankfully, Qantas ruined all the flights. So we missed it. Absolutely missed out on a perfect opportunity. So thanks, Qantas, for that. But nevertheless, we had our holiday. And on the last day of leaving the UK, I emailed Anna, Rory's EA, and I said, Anna, I'm going to be in London, passing through to go back to the airport, to fly back to Sydney. Is there a possibility of catching up with Rory? And Anna said, funny, as luck would have it, there's a train strike on, and he can't go anywhere. So we got some time with Rory. So we went and bought his book. If you've not got The Alchemy yet, go and get it. I got Rory to sign it for me, which is even better. And we had an hour and a bit actually with Rory, talking all things behavioral science, and it was literally incredible. So I came back, and Rory and I have been communicating ever since. Now, Rory is the vice chairman of Ogilvy. I'm going to introduce him now for you. I mean, he would say it's an attractively vague job, which has allowed him to co-found the behavioral sciences practices at Ogilvy. So he works with a consulting practice of psychology graduates who look for unseen opportunities in consumer behavior, which is all what we're talking about here with Mathew and the metaverse. So Rory says that it's a hugely valuable activity, but it's not particularly lucrative because clients generally don't have budgets for solving problems that they don't know they've got. So before founding Ogilvy, Rory was a copywriter and the creative director for Ogilvy for 20 years. He joined as a graduate trainee in 1988, and he's been the president of the IPA, the chair of the judges of the direct jury of Cannes. He's spoken at TED Global, where you may have seen him all across the TED Talks. He writes regular columns for The Spectator, The Market Leader, and Impact. He's also occasionally writes pieces for Wired. He's the author of 2 books, one I just showed you, and The Wiki Man, which are all available on Amazon. And apparently they're at prices between £1.96 and $2,354, depending on whether the algorithm's having a good or bad day. And at best, the alchemy is it's all about surprising power of ideas which don't make sense. And we fit squarely into that. So Rory, if you didn't know, is married to a vicar. He's got twin 19-year-old daughters. He lives in the former home of Napoleon III. Now, unfortunately, it's in the attic, but he's a trustee of the Benjamin Franklin House in London. He's the patron of Rochester Cathedral and meetmagic chief evangelist. Now, Rory couldn't make it, but he sent us this.
Of remote or flexible working crops up. You always get a certain degree of angst, typically on the part of managers, about the loss of serendipity. Those kind of chance corridor encounters or the casual conversation next to the water cooler. And by the way, I think people are right to be concerned about that. That's why I'm not an advocate of wholly remote working. I think you need a degree of co-location precisely for those unintended yet valuable exchanges. But in that conversation, we're missing a much bigger opportunity which has arisen since the pandemic on account of the widespread adoption and familiarity with technologies like Zoom and technologies like Teams. And that's the vastly greater opportunity, if well managed, for far more serendipitous encounters outside the organization. And it's those that are actually, in many cases, the most valuable. I mean, after all, you're going to have some conversations with your teammates anyway. You work together all the time. On the other hand, there may be a company on the other side of town or indeed the other side of the world of whose existence you're completely unaware. And the discovery of a potential partnership or client indeed, or indeed customer in that conversation can be many, many times more valuable, in fact, than many of the conversations you have inside. And the great news is that since you don't need a travel budget, you don't need to book a meeting room, you don't need to kind of get the meeting approved, you can have those casual conversations all the time. There's a huge opportunity. Now, serendipity is really, really important. And we always forget it precisely because you can't plan for it, we don't really properly account for it. You can't necessarily decide how you're going to be lucky. The best you can do is actually increase your surface exposure to fortune. And in fact, both in algorithm design and indeed in animal foraging, there's this concept called the explore-exploit trade-off. A certain percentage of your resources, typically more than half, have to be devoted to exploiting what you already know. That's a standard conventional optimization problem. It's, what you might call narrow-minded accountancy, efficiency improvements, that kind of thing. And we all know how to do that. When they looked at bees, they discovered that bees, 20 million years before there were even humans to talk about algorithms, had already discovered the explore-exploit trade-off. And that's because although bees have a very sophisticated waggle dance where they direct the bee journeys where they already know a source of pollen and nectar is to be found, about 20%, it varies according to a huge range of factors, but about 20% of bees seem to completely ignore the waggle dance. They went off at random. And people thought, this is really odd. You'd think in 20 million years of bee evolution, we would have kind of evolved bee compliance officers who demanded greater compliance with the waggle dance to bring our nectar collection target in line with our forecast for Q3. And indeed, if all the bees obeyed the waggle dance, in the immediate short term, the hive would be more efficient. The problem is the hive would then get trapped in a local maximum. It was effectively over-optimized on past information. It was incapable of discovering new sources of nutrition. And over time, trapped in this local maximum, as soon as the environment changed, the hive would starve to death. Which is why all the surviving bees, the bees that actually have survived these 20 million years, have learned that there's a trade-off between doing what you know you have to do and doing it as well as possible, and exploring what you don't yet know. Trying to get lucky in some shape or form. It's essential both to the resilience of the hive, but it's also essential to the growth of a hive, because it's only by actually random exploration that you can discover new sources of income, effectively, although bees don't call it that. And this is where it gets really interesting, because the slight problem is, well, do you just randomly meet everybody? No, I don't think you can. There simply aren't the hours in the day. But you can meet maybe 5 times more people virtually, maybe 100 times more virtually, than you could feasibly meet physically. There aren't the travel costs. In many cases, there isn't the flight booking or the 3-night hotel stay entailed in meeting those people physically. You can also make those meetings more casually, because they don't require you to be present in a particular place. And let's be absolutely candid, you know, if you postpone a Zoom meeting, it's not the end of the world. If you postpone a meeting when someone's travelled to Melbourne for 3 hours to come and see you, it's a real social embarrassment. There are lots and lots of reasons why we can increase our degree of what you might call random bee activity as businesses, made possible by these new technologies. But there is a limit, and this is why I think meet magic is absolutely, well, quite literally, magic. And the reason is that by effectively requesting a charitable donation for the meeting, you filter your search to those people who are most likely to be actually relevant and worth meeting, and whose presence is, shall we say, worth exploring, for the simple reason that they've made a costly signal that they believe they can be of value to you. Now, as I said, you could cheekily do that through bribery, but that's generally frowned on. What this is beautiful is that it has the focus, if you like, that the person is making a payment to see you, and therefore you can reasonably expect they have something worthwhile to say, otherwise they'd be giving that money to somebody else. But on the other hand, you don't get all the problems that happen if the money goes to you. What happens is the money which often would have been spent on hosting a trade show stand, or taking someone on a golf weekend, or doing those other rather kind of extravagant things that businesses do to demonstrate their commitment to each other. Instead, the commitment, rather than going to a golf club, or rather than going to a kind of, you know, sports event in the form of hospitality, rather than going to an exhibition hall, it actually goes to a really worthwhile charity. I think this is an interesting idea, because I think economists will love it, because it uses effectively costly signalling and commitment to filter your attention. If only email cost £10 to send, every email you received will be really, really relevant. So it does that wonderful, wonderful thing. But more important than the fact that economists will find it beautiful, I think both the meeting setters and the meeting takers will, as ordinary human beings, find the whole thing both gloriously efficient and unbelievably elegant. I'm really, really proud to support this business. I think it's magnificent.
Well, I can't tell you how proud that makes me feel as a founder. I spoke to Cliff Oberecht at Canva about, you know, chief evangelists, and when I saw Rory, he was it for me. So anyway, without any more, we've got this series of a couple of talks to get through. So the first person I want to bring on stage for 5 minutes for a quick chat is one of our recent partners, a new partner, someone that for me represents where I come from, which is pretty much from nothing. Jameson, before we get, this is obviously before we get to Professor Mathew with the metaverse talk, but to prelude this, I want to introduce Jamie as he's the founder of a company called Devon. It's one of our partners. When I met Jamie, he told me his story about how he became involved in cybersecurity, and it wasn't like anything you've heard before. He was on the streets, he was living rough, and he was hacking credit cards to put food on the table. Today, his business stops companies from getting ripped off, pretty much. So, Jamie, I'm going to bring you up and add you up to the stage. And I just want to say, you can introduce yourself and what you do if you like. But can I just say, when we first met and you told me your story, I didn't think people had starts in life like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it does happen. And I think, you know, I was lucky enough not to to get caught up in that world. I saw enough people around me and the cycle that they went through of going to jail and coming out and doing the same thing over and over again. And, it wasn't really a noble decision. It was more of a selfish decision for me to look at that and say, well, I don't really, I'm smarter than that. I'm not going to go down that kind of cycle. And then thankfully I met some people in the security industry who, really saved me really in terms of the opportunities they gave to me. So yeah.
It's really quite remarkable. It's really quite remarkable. And, we heard Rory talk about the buzz and in the B world, and Matthew's going to talk about the buzz in the metaverse world. We had this question come through here. What's the buzz when it comes to security of the metaverse?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I've got some slides that I'll try to show here. Could you pop them up?
Sorry, I thought you were going to stick them up.
Yep, no worries. So yeah, I mean, it's just like anything new, any new introduction. I really love what Rory said about the the explore exploit trade-off, and anything like the metaverse and like even AI now, it really does introduce a new avenue, both for criminals and for businesses. So I think I just wanted to touch on 3 quick things that I think are really important when we talk about security in the metaverse, specifically, how it changes the game for both companies and hackers when it comes to phishing. I think, as Rory mentioned, with the bees that explore new avenues, and as businesses explore them, so do criminals. So it doesn't just expand the horizon for businesses wanting to grow, it also expands the avenues that hackers can attack people. I really think in this space, what we'll see is, people will start to perform what I call meta phishing, which is basically where, they profile someone's metaverse avatar and then try and fool people to deceive or extract information. Just it's the age-old story of the fish, right? But it's just using a metaverse touch. And I think what's also interesting is that I think, again, back to what Rory said about local maximum and complacency, I think businesses are in a really dangerous spot to become complacent in terms of moving into these new fields and solely thinking just about, profit and growth and not really understanding the new security threats that they face. I think businesses will need to find new ways to stay ahead of the curve and actually understand from an attacker's perspective, how would an attacker phish me? I think, users are quite well trained now when it comes to phishing with emails and phone calls and scam calls. But when you're dealing with things in the metaverse, just by nature, someone's avatar in the metaverse isn't always a real representation of themselves. So it becomes harder to authenticate who you actually are. And I think one thing which will be really interesting too is that everything we see now when it comes to, or most things we see when it comes to phishing and scams, they're usually a really point in time event. You'll get a phishing email. The time you read that, it could be like 2 to 3 minutes. Same with a scam call. It's over and it's a scam and you hang up. But when you're dealing with scams in the metaverse, it's almost like a second life for you in some cases. And, you walk out into the metaverse world, and if you're engaging with people, you're building relationships over a long period of time in the metaverse, specifically if we're talking about things like VR and virtual reality worlds. And so, that can play on people's emotions a lot more than it can, in the 5 minutes you read an email. So I think the line between, genuine and manipulated content will blur when it comes to like virtual worlds. And that will also mean we need to figure out ways to detect this stuff in real time, continuously. So yeah, that's my predictions for security in the metaverse, and my 2 cents.
It's really interesting, and I think anyone that's got anything to protect, they should reach out to Devon and go and have a conversation, because I think one of the things that stood out to me, Jamie, was the fact that you're coming from a very different perspective. You're not coming from a Big Four consulting perspective that's learned it at university. You're coming from a lived experience where you've done it yourself, and that's a very different position to come from. And you often find holes where they wouldn't. So I think that's a huge value.
I think the reality is, like, people usually pay penetration testers or security companies. If you really think about what they're paying to simulate what a real world attacker would do. I've been the real world attacker, so I know what a real world attacker would do. So, it gives me that little extra mile that I can think outside of the box and sometimes push a little further than most people usually would.
Jamison, you're an amazing human being. You're a dad, you're a family man, and you're a businessman. And the distance traveled for me, is absolutely remarkable. From where you've come from to where you are now, that distance traveled, bro. I take my hat off to you, because I feel I've done the same. So thanks for coming on. I hope people come out to you. We'll post this video so everyone can come and reach out to Yvonne if they need some help.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity, Carl. Thanks, Rory, for the video.
Yeah, no, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, last minute, right? These things are always best last minute. This is where the opportunities exist. You say yes to things that you wouldn't necessarily say yes to. Coming live on LinkedIn, who does that?
Yep.
But anyway,
I'm keen. Apologies, I can't stay around to see Professor Mathew's talk, but I'll definitely watch the video after this when I get some time.
Easy. All good.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks. Take care. Beautiful, man. What a great man. Now, this is the main event. So I wanted to talk to a little bit about how we came to talk to Professor Mathew, because it's been quite a while now. But Professor Matthew's put together this presentation for us, where if you're in retail, you're absolutely going to have to get some value out of this, without a doubt. So Professor Mathew is the founder of the MLabs, which is based out of the Sydney University. I'll put it up on here. I'll put this up at the end as well, so you can have a look at this. Just so you can, after the presentation, if you want to reach out to him, there is a QR code there which you can scan and go and have a look. But I think this presentation here is going to be fascinating. You're going to learn so much. I'm going to bring Professor up onto stage at the moment and add these things to the stage. Professor Mathew, thanks for coming in and giving this talk, because I think there's a lot of buzz around the metaverse, and I think you've spent the past 10 years in this space.
Yes. So thanks for this. So I'm based at the University of New South Wales, UNSW, and rightly you mentioned I've spent the last 10 years with an international team researching what we call these reality enhancing technologies, augmented virtual reality and the metaverse, as it's being known now. Through that research and that sort of rigorous academic research, we've come up with a lot of insights that haven't been sort of disseminated through the business community yet. And this is one of the purposes of the Metaverse Lab, the MLab, is essentially to try to bring forward to businesses these sort of insights that we developed through academic research.
Really interesting.
So my presentation is called "Is This for Real?" and this kind of links with the talk from Jamie, where he suggested there is a blurring of these lines between what's real and what's imagined and what's sort of fake in these worlds. So the question is the metaverse real? Is this for real? How do we bring out value, and how do we revolutionize customer experiences through these reality enhancing technologies, and especially marketing? So through this presentation, what I'll be doing is I'll be going through and trying to look at where does the future lie? What is the unique aspect of the metaverse? Because there is quite a bit of uncertainty about these new technologies. How do they fit in within current business models? Where does the value lie? How do we extract that value? And I'll be presenting some of the new concepts and ideas that we've developed through our research. So the first question, where does the future of marketing lie? And the premise of this talk is that the future of marketing is critically linked to digitization of the economy. And, this push towards the digitization has been driven very much by, large companies, technology companies. A lot of it is coming through computer science. And there's not as much innovation happening in marketing and marketing theory itself. The concepts that we've got in marketing are the ones that we've been using for the last 20 years or so, even though the technology and the space in which we market has changed so much. And this is the purpose of the Metaverse Lab, to address this concern about conceptualization. How do we frame marketing in this new world? So if you think about what digitization has done to customer experience and to the economy in general, in this digital age, customers' buying journey has been revolutionized, of course. Now you can access, vast amounts of products compared to, let's say, 20 years ago, get AI-driven personalization and catalogs. And in this process, however, it seems that something has been lost. And this is what we call, in our research, the first wave of digitization. These large companies like Amazon or Alibaba that have come through, that aggregate a lot of products, and they create these efficiencies. So the focus on what Rory has been talking about in terms of optimizing efficiency and optimizing the process of transactions, making sure that you can, browse through this large, vast amount of products and get them delivered as soon as possible at a minimum cost. But at the point of customer experience, something has been lost. If you think about the interactions that we used to have, you would go, let's say, to a bookstore, and those bookstores now sort of a memory, but some of you who may remember, going to a bookstore, just the quiet ambience, the smell of the pages, holding the book itself, just the other people around you. You don't necessarily have to talk to them, but just knowing that you're in this community of people that are enjoying the same ambience and the same environment. Whereas, these days we interact with these 2D screens. We sit in front of our laptop or a desktop and we scroll through products on the Amazon webpage, going through the airport, interacting with the sales personnel. A real human being is now a luxury. Unless you're traveling business class, you'll be, pressing, touch screens and getting yourself booked on the flight. And as that efficiency has been gained, what Amazon has done, it has displaced a lot of the community, the businesses, the little businesses that had this sense of community and value of these chance encounters that you would get interacting at those service points. A lot of that is going away. And with introduction of generative AI into this mix, even the content that we see on our screens, on our 2D screens, is now being generated by AI, and the human element is being removed from this. So where does the metaverse fit into this? Well, potentially there is another way. And there is this potential for what we call channel integration. So the way we have defined the metaverse, the way we, in our research, the way we think about the metaverse is about integration of these reality enhancing technologies, which are augmented reality, virtual reality, and further down the line, neuro-enhanced reality. So let me go through each of those and give you a bit of a feel for what they are and how they're being integrated into this mishmash, into this sort of cohesive reality-enhanced experience that's going to be the overall metaverse. So the metaverse, the way we define it, is not any one platform. So it's not Meta's Horizon Worlds, it's not Roadblocks. The way we think about it is bringing together reality enhancing technology in a seamless interaction. So this when we think about, let's say, augmented reality, a good example of this is the IKEA's Place app. What you can do these days is go into your home, bring up the app on your phone, and it will project, life-size furniture and it will project it into your physical space. So it's this integration of physical and digital space in augmented reality, where you can see how an IKEA couch or a chair would look like in your own specific room. And we've often had that experience where you go into a store, let's say you go into IKEA, look at some furniture there, and you say, oh, that couch would look really nice. You bring it home and suddenly it looks different. And the difference is the context, because when you look at a product at IKEA, it's a curated environment for you. They've arranged things in a certain way that the actual couch looks well in that environment. So the way we value, the way we assess products, and that's what Rory would also sort of stress, is partly contextual. Whether something looks good or not depends on the background, on what it's surrounded by. And often we have these imagination gaps when we are at a store and we're trying to figure out whether this product is going to look good in my own use environment. It's kind of hard to mentally project images of these products into your physical environment. So what augmented reality tends to do, it brings products into your digital environment, and various companies use this. Amazon might use it as well to bring products into your physical. What virtual reality does, it moves this forward into creating a virtual background where you can go through these interaction with the virtual environment, and the background itself can be manipulated. It can add value to the actual experience. So moving seamlessly from augmented to virtual reality, that's where we think the metaverse is going to be. It's going to be bringing digital products into your physical space and then taking you on a journey into these virtual spaces where you can travel, where you can experience whether it's a hotel that you're going to visit or a destination. You're going to be taking on these virtual tours, and you'll build attitudes and experiences through these technologies. And eventually, at some point, this will integrate through things like Neuralink and neuro-enhanced reality. We've done some research on this as well. So the metaverse, the way we define it, is this integration of these reality-enhancing technologies that enhance your experience of reality through digital means, but they do it in a very different way than what's been done in the first wave of digitization. They do it in a sensory way. They do it in a contextual way. However, there is quite a bit of uncertainty about these technologies at this stage. When you think about Facebook's rebranding into Meta, it's been criticized as a public relations exercise, or companies like Apple bringing out products and hardware. It's very much being driven by the technology companies trying to move customers into this new environment without actually updating the concepts of why customers should move into this environment. So what is it that users actually want? And this is what we've been researching. So in the MLab, in the Metaverse Lab, what we research is not so much the technology trying to improve, the performance of augmented reality and the frame rate or something. What we look at is how customers interact with it and what are the new ways of interacting with this technology. So this is going to be the crux of this presentation. And it's what we call the second wave of digitization. So while many companies still struggle to develop a website, the technology now allows us to move into digitization that's based on multi-sensory interactions that create atmospherics and emotional connections with customers. It allows us to bring context back into this digital marketing. So the environment in which you're making your decisions, the environment in which you're interacting with customers, just the background of it and the context is going to create quite a bit of value. And this is the unique aspect of these metaverse technologies, and also the relationships and the connections with others. So much of the metaverse and these 3D virtual worlds have developed through gaming and multiplayer games with these days a lot of especially younger customers, this generation alpha, I think that you call them, they're coming up through their socialization process, interacting in these virtual worlds, interacting through avatars and unique experiences that they have. And so we've conceptualized this as two different pathways towards value creation. There is the standard, well understood pathway in marketing based on what we call value in use. So this is the focal selling of a product, goal directed, right? You might be selling your brand of toothpaste or whatever you're selling. And the customer is going to get value by using that specific product, by using the toothpaste, and it's goal-directed value in use. It's extracting value by creating use. On the other hand, there is contextual value, and we call this value in being in the environment, being part of the environment, immersing yourself. So rather than taking things out of the environment and creating value that way, putting yourself into the environment and creating that value in use through context and meaning. And a lot of that context and meaning, that value in being, is created through the atmosphere. It's creating through being in that bookshop. If you think about this, we can bring the bookshop back through these technologies. We can create an environment where there's an atmosphere, where there is a sensory interaction with parts of the environment and the context, and these other avatars that are moving around, and they're specifically focused and interested, and there is a community and a group here. So this is the focus of the second wave of digitization that's going to bring back some of what has potentially been lost. But the question is, how is it doing this? Well, we've done about 10 years of research, and I'm not going to go through a lot of it, but just some highlights of the research that we've done. So we know that customers have these limited ability to process information, right? It's bounded rationality, bounded ability to imagine things. So whenever people can offload information to the technology, help the technology do some of the thinking for them, they're very happy to do this. And we've noticed that customers' decisions can be improved by using augmented and virtual reality technologies to help them get better sense of what the product is, not just the focal aspect of the product, but how the product functions in their environment. So some of the research that we've done shows that using augmented reality, for example, gives you a much different valuation on a product than if you simply look at it in a 2D website, right? And part of it is not just that you understand the features of the product, but you understand how those features connect with the context, your environment, right? If you can see the product in your own living room, if you can see that chair, it's a very different experience than just looking at it on the website. Bringing the multi-sensory interaction creates value through these atmospheres that we create. Being able to interact with these products creates a sense of ownership even before you buy the product. And that sense of ownership translates into greater value, greater willingness to pay and purchase the product. It boosts creativity and builds attitudes and processes willingness to buy. So we've been doing a lot of this research, and we've been developing a lot of insights about how to market, how to interact with customers in these new worlds, in the second wave of digitization that is very much contextual. And yet, when we look at what brands are actually doing, we notice that many of them, even most, are doing it wrong. And the question is, why are they doing it wrong? What are they missing? And really what they're missing is not the technology, they're missing the concept. They're missing the idea of what it is to actually market in the metaverse. So what companies are often missing, what they're missing is nuance, is this ability to say, what does it depend on? How does the context create value, and what is the process? So if you take an example, we followed an example of, for example, Ralph Lauren, who after months of development launched on Roblox. So Roblox is one of those metaverse platforms like 3D World. And they launched with the intention of getting customers to interact with virtual replicas of their clothing in order to drive sales and, sales of physical products. They essentially wanted to increase sales of physical products. Now, they took their initial store down within weeks after launch. And the key problem was the creative execution. So they managed to replicate the physical products quite well that they have, but they haven't created value, because people can understand what the physical products are in a standard way. They can look at them on a website, they can look at those in a video. Why would they look at them in a virtual world? What's the added value here? So the concern was that replicating physical settings in these unique environments, these virtual environments, wasn't actually creating a lot of value. In fact, it was being counterproductive. If you think about what the virtual world is, it's a world where notions of physics and notions of causality and common sense perceptions, they're no longer relevant. You can fly, you can walk through doors that turn into bursts of butterflies. There is boundless creativity that can happen through this. And the customers, the younger generations that are growing up with this technology, they're actually used to these experiences through these interactive games that they have. So giving them a replica of a physical setting is really boring. Same thing happened to Samsung. They initially set up a replica of their New York physical store on Decentraland. So Decentraland is another platform that's related to the metaverse. And again, after spending a lot of time and effort creating that replica of their physical store, they found that people were not that interested. They looked at it and said, what's new about this? So what is required is a new conceptualization of what marketing is in this new world, because this new world provides opportunities that marketers are not used to. If you've grown up in physical worlds and marketing in physical worlds, you're not going to have the new concepts required to actually market in this new setting. There's also a lot of dependencies, things that say, well, whether it works or not kind of depends on very nuanced understanding. So in some of our research, what we found that, for example, augmented reality and virtual reality, in some settings, they can actually backfire. So you can spend a lot of time developing an augmented reality application, you launch it, and you find that willingness to pay or willingness to buy actually goes down. Right? Why does that happen? And it happens because contextualization. So we played around with some of these applications, and what we noticed was that customers who looked at products that did not have background, so like, on a standard background, white background, like on Amazon, that focuses people's attention to the focal features of the product, and that's what people focus on. When they bring it home, they don't focus so much on the focal features of the product, they focus on the background and how the product interacts with their background. And in some situations, maybe your house, maybe your physical setting isn't as great as what you imagine, or isn't as great as what's been curated on the website for you. You bring it home and you say, oh, actually, in that setting, so your experience is more authentic, it's more real, like you're making better decisions because you really understand how the product fits in your living room, but at the same time you understand this is not the right product for me, and I'm less willing to pay for it, less willing to buy it if I was making the decision through a standard website. So there's a lot of nuance there that happens. There's also this process that for some people it helps, for others it doesn't. And again, through our research, we're finding that some people are better at visualizing. Other people are better at verbalizing their ideas. And for those who are not as good at visualizing, using these technologies to offload this ability to imagine and visualize onto the technology does help, right? It helps you understand these products better. But there are groups, there are segments in the market of people who are actually really good at visualizing. And we tried this with some of the Amazon augmented reality applications for these different groups of people. And what we found was that the group that was really good at imagining things found augmented reality visualizations limiting, and they actually wanted to pay less for these products. They were less satisfied with the augmented reality experience than the group that was very good at verbalizing but not so good at visualizing. Why does this happen? Well, if you think about buying a toy, let's say, this was part of our experiment. So people were buying a toy for their child, some kind of cuddly little bear or something, right? If you're really good at visualizing, you can imagine your child playing throughout the house. You can imagine how they interact with it. You can imagine various scenarios that this toy makes your child happy, right? On the other hand, if you're using augmented reality, it narrows your imagination. It focuses it of how this toy is going to look like on the shelf here. And that whole world of imagination is kind of being disrupted a little bit. So there is some interference happening in your ability to imagine. On the other hand, if you really have difficulty visualizing how this toy is going to look like in the child's room, because you're more of a verbal kind of person, then that really helps. Right. So there's a lot of dependency. There's a lot of nuance where these technologies work and where they don't. And the idea of the context is really very important here. And this is what we've been working on in terms of creating these new concepts of what value is in this new space. Where does the value come from? And being academics, we like to draw graphs. Right, so we have a graph here for you to try to explain this process. But why are some of the brands doing it wrong? Why are they falling into these pitfalls? And part of it can be explained on a two-dimensional surface. So on the horizontal, what I've got is what we call metaphorical elevation. So you can make things very literal. This is what Samsung tried to do in replicating the physical store. They just replicated how it looks like. Or you can make it completely figurative and imaginative, right? You can move along this dimension and try to extend from literal representation to more figurative, more imaginative representation. You can also have what we call a nonsensical divergence. So you can make things standard, mundane, and you can move them onto this surreal sort of space. But when you put those together, what we've got is a process of creating things that are different, unique, and almost surreal, and creating a sense-making process through a metaphor. So currently, what we notice is the metaverse and a lot of the applications where the brands are investing is in this current level where the metaverse is somewhat mundane. It tries to replicate the physical settings, and the interpretation of it is very literal. Right? We're going to have an event and we're going to run around in a circle, or we're going to have a fashion show. That's all very much standard, right? On the other hand, what you could do is you could move beyond this and say, we're going to have an event where we're in outer space, we're floating through the outer space, listening to a concert and music. So Travis, one of the sort of rappers and music producers, has held a concert in the metaverse where to get into the concert, you had to don, or your avatar had to put on a spacesuit, an orange spacesuit, and then you were able to float around listening to the music. Now, that created a unique divergent experience. But the process of actually preparing for that experience, the metaphor of putting a spacesuit, like in the metaverse, you don't need a spacesuit to float. But because you go through this process, this metaphor that I'm going to put a spacesuit and it allows me to freely float, it created a new experience that was meaningful to people. So it wasn't just divergent. It wasn't just a way of disorienting people by making them float around. It created meaning for them through this process of a metaphor. So the advances that we are creating in terms of concepts in marketing are based on how do we create these divergent experiences? How do we use brand metaphors? And how do we get to a point of potential metaverse? So moving from the current metaverse to potential metaverse, where the customers develop these brand epiphanies. They go through a divergent experience, but it's so meaningful that they go, wow, I understand something new about this experience. So the concert, the music concert, allowed customers to realize freedom and freedom of expression by floating around in music. So the music, the meaning and the epiphany of that music was being free, letting go of concerns, right? That was the metaphorical interpretation. And what we're creating is this optimum zone of hyper reality where brand value is created. So you don't want to overemphasize the metaphor. Like, so there was an example, for example, of Hyundai cars where they made you, drive a Hyundai in roadblocks, I think, in virtual space, jumping over bridges and things, trying to convince you that the car is much more exciting than what it normally is, right? So staying within this bound of optimum zone of hyper, where we match the surreal experience with metaphorical explanation, that's where value is being created. And we've developed a concept, right? So how do you make this work for you? What does it take to make it work? Well, it takes this concept of what we call Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, right? If you think about this metaphor of Alice having adventures in the Wonderland, how does that help us create value in these metaverse experiences? Well, firstly, we need to create a Wonderland. So there is a lot of talk about building virtual worlds and virtual worlds for your brand, but that's missing the point a little bit. You're not really trying to create a virtual world. You're not trying to replicate the world. What you're doing is you're trying to build a wonderland. So the difference between what a world is and what a wonderland is. Wonderland is exciting. Wonderland is engaging. Wonderland is new and different. The wonderland is actually on purpose made different to a physical world, right? It's a process where you want to be in that wonderland. And what happens to Alice? Well, Alice doesn't just go into the wonderland. Alice is guided into the wonderland. If you think about it, she follows the white rabbit into the wonderland. So bringing customers into these divergent experiences, these wonderland experiences, requires guidance. So we've been developing processes and ways of actually bringing people into this state of presence within these divergent experiences. So you don't just leave the customer and say, here is the world, go play. No, you have to ease them in, you have to bring them in, you have to guide them in. How do you sustain them? How do you keep them? How do you keep engagement? Well, it's through adventure. And again, this is a new concept of brand adventures that we're developing. It's a little bit extending from what you might be used to in terms of storytelling, because an adventure is a first-person engagement. It overcomes challenges and creates excitement. So creating brain adventures in this world is very important, and it goes beyond simple gameplay. It's about how do we make these adventures meaningful for customers in terms of metaphors. So what we've got is a basic model of Alice's adventures in the Wonderland that helps us bring together about 10 years of research, the insights. We kind of compressed that information into this representation, where you create wonderlands, you guide customers in, you engage them through adventures, and you make it meaningful through a metaphor that later links with the customer integrating that information. And so this is how you manage divergent experiences, experiences that are going to engage customers. And what we've been doing through our research is bringing this into alignment with standard marketing metrics, right? It's not good enough simply to create these worlds and create value, but how do you capture value for your organization, for your company? And we've been developing these sort of processes where you can look at how do we acquire customers, how do we retain, how do we increase willingness to pay, how do we increase customer referrals in relation to these variables of wonderland, presence, adventure, sense making. And one thing that comes out is that essentially we have to move our concepts beyond technology. So a lot of what's been done in this space has been driven by the technology companies saying, here are the tools. And they're finding that customers are not really that interested in playing with those tools. And the reason for that is because they're focusing on technology rather than marketing. However, we need to move beyond just marketing and think about strategy. How do we integrate this process, right? How do we integrate marketing metrics with creating value in this process? And this process of integration of these marketing metrics is where the value is being created. So a couple of examples. Well, some brands like Gucci or Vans on Roblox have been able to create engaging experiences for customers. So Gucci have their own Gucci Town, for example, on Roblox, in which they hold fashion shows, and Vans holds events where customers interact with other customers and avatars. The business case for the metaverse has to move beyond gaming and entertainment. Right? It hasn't been put convincingly yet. And currently, a lot of brands are still uncertain about, what the value potential of this is for their own industry, right? So, most brands currently, there are fashion brands. And what does the metaverse offer other industries? So the key point about this metaverse commerce and the strategy of the metaverse commerce is about creating the context for the customer in valuing products. Most of our thinking is contextual. Most of our thinking is what Rory would argue, determined by the context. That a lot of the behavioral economics literature is about changing the context and changing the customer's valuation. And this is what we are essentially doing. We have the ability to create context for customers now. So the second wave of digitization is going to be about building these contexts to create value. So when we think about where does the academic research takes us? It takes us into this idea of how do we bring the ideas of behavioral economics and context into creating value in these metaverse spaces. So this is what we do. This is what our Metaverse Lab is about. I'll give you just one example of this, of a recent project that we've been involved in. And this is based on virtual reality in a standard supermarket environment. And we've been doing this kind of research. And there are some critical insights from this. It's a very simple idea, right? But potentially has disruptive or completely changing the value process and how do we monetize value in a supermarket. The idea of the augmented reality application is very simple. All it does is it removes color from your perception of the supermarket shelf. So it desaturates color, right? And suddenly the products, the brands that have spent so much time developing the packaging and the shelf space, suddenly it's irrelevant. It's just there, but it's bland. You don't notice it. What the app is doing, it's highlighting certain products for the customer. So it's assisting in the search process in the supermarket. And the focus of this research was that customers may have problems following on their actual desired. So when you decide what to buy in a supermarket, you often go there and on impulse you start buying other things and you forget what you're supposed to buy. So the application like this, augmented reality application like this, helps you pre-commit to your shopping list, and it helps you find it much more quickly, right? So it removes all the irrelevant information. So it actually removes information and it focuses you on where the products are to buy. But what it does is, for example, supermarkets will charge you for position on the shelf space. That's no longer relevant because the customer doesn't have to search through all these products. They don't look at anything else. They go straight to the product, whether it's on the bottom, on the top shelf, they notice it doesn't have to be eye level, right? So that's completely disruptive. Or the packaging, right? The packaging becomes irrelevant. How do you track the customer? Well, you track them through what's highlighted in this app. So essentially this app, what it's done is it's taken the value that supermarkets were creating and it's taken it for itself, right? It can, like, where will a brand spend money? Will its brand spend money on positioning on the shelf, and will it spend money on packaging, or will it spend money simply on highlighting through the app, right? So it's like Google taking over the search results. This is taking over the search process in the physical space. So these applications can introduce information into the context and make the context rich, or they can remove information, make the context bland, and highlight specific parts of the information. And there's a lot of behavioral literature that comes into this that helps us understand how we manage focus and how we manage value through this process. We do various projects in terms of education as well, how it boosts creativity, how we can seed creativity in teams by having people experience events and simulate events and then move them into other teams. And we find that creativity is enhanced. So this is what we do. We run studies to understand the nuance and develop new constructs and new ways of understanding where value is being created in these unique spaces of the metaverse. That's my presentation.
Fascinating subject, Matthew. I keep thinking of Rory. He understands that decision making is emotionally led, and what you're playing into there is absolutely exactly the same. It sounds like a lot of the people have been trying with the metaverse to develop things, but they're really creating the reality, the real world, and trying to make that into the metaverse. And it's not the same.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, there needs to be a change in perspective and a set of new concepts in marketing that are following on to this idea of brand metaphors, brand epiphanies, and new ways of representing brands to customers.
So you've been working with retail brands in this space. I mean, this is something that's surely is becoming more and more popular. I think as more and more people just go into virtual worlds to do their thing. Are you seeing there's a lot of brands taking this seriously?
I think there is a lot of interest, but there is also a lot of uncertainty. A lot of brands are still uncertain how to create value in this, and also which customer segments are going to be relevant. And if you think about the current people, the current sort of segments that are interacting in Roblox, over 50% of them are under the age of 13. So there it's it's the generation alpha that's growing up with this, this new technology, and they're actually used to these divergent experiences. They expect them, but then there are other customers that are being introduced through these by following personalities like Travis Scott into the concert and in the metaverse. So that's how they're being introduced into these spaces. But yeah, like a lot of brands are still uncertain about, you know, where the value comes from and how to access customers in that space.
Well, one thing you've done is you had a graph up there, which was, I can't do it with my hands, but you had the graph up. This one here, let me see if I can find it. But it was really interesting because this really, if you have on the left hand side the surreal side, that should be messing around, and that figurative side should be find out. And if you draw a line from the literal all the way up diagonal, the more you mess around, the more you find out. And so what they should be doing is coming to you and understanding what they can do to get into this space. And the more they mess around, the more they'll find out. At the moment, it seems like they're all being, most of them will be in the mundane space, not getting very far. So
yeah, absolutely. So in our lab, what we've been developing is processes and guidelines for metaphorical evaluation. How do we build these brand metaphors, and how do we help companies actually, you know, operate in this surreal space?
Yeah, I hope they come to you. I mean, if anybody watching, or if you're watching the replay or the recording, and you want to get hold of Mathew and engage and have a conversation, I think it's a fascinating space, and it definitely, from Rory's bees and buzz and to Jameson's security buzz, there's definitely a buzz about this. It's moving that way. I mean, there's got to be, if you're not looking at this now, you're sort of putting yourself behind. We're seeing the same thing in what we're doing with meetmagic. You know, we're really the explore, we're not the exploit. We're something new, it's different. Come and test out with meetmagic, and you might have a lucky accident. That's really where we are. And I think it's the same thing with the metaverse. Go and mess around with it, and you might just have a lucky accident, and that can only be good for business growth, because it's, you know, I think when often what budgets, what people do when they have budgets is they tend to go and spend it on things that are expensive. So they need to come and invest some of that budget into things like to explore things with the metaverse and what you're doing. So I just want to say thank you for coming and putting that together and sharing that with us. It's a bit of value for our community to look at. I'm hoping we can share this with all of the retail clients that we've got. That, you know, it's everyone from Bunnings and West Farmers right through to some of the stores like Universal stores and so on. So I'm sure, you know, this whole space is really at the tip of the iceberg, really, in terms of exploring it. So I think more people should come to you and have a look at this.
Pleasure, and thanks for the opportunity.
No problem at all. And thanks everyone for watching, for tuning in. A bit long, but we got there in the end. I think it was there's a whole lot of value in there. Go and watch Rory, watch Jameson's piece, because it's, you know, that whole psychology in the metaverse is going to be fascinating to watch, how that all plays out. I mean, I often think that meetings should be done in the metaverse as well. We should be sat here feeling like we're in New York having a meeting, but we're actually not there. We're here. And I think there's a whole lot of the things that we're not working out or we're not doing yet. But it's still very early days, I think, for everything. And this is really a space to watch. So thanks once again, Mathew, and thanks everybody for watching. I'm going to end the stream, and recording will be up on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and wherever you want to go and watch it. And stay safe out there.